and told him that she would keep me after school and bring me home in the afternoon a couple times a week. When I went to her house, she would bake with me, tell me stories. She was a folk storyteller, and we would sing and dance and laugh together. And I loved that time with her. This went on up until I was about in 5th grade. I remember my dad had a friend, Holly, and she was never really around until I was like in 2nd or 3rd grade that I can remember. But she knew my mom, and she would talk about her to me. And my dad would never talk to me about my mom or even acknowledge me when I would try. We had no pictures of her in our house, but Holly would. And she had a daughter, Melanie, who was 8 years older than me. And Holly would take me with her during the weekends because my dad didn't know how to deal with his emotions of losing my mom, so he started drinking heavily. And Melody would allow me to go hang out with her and her friends. There I was exposed to what I would consider teenage stuff, sexual talk, boyfriends, etc. That year, my dad had a major heart attack and was in the hospital. After recovering shortly from that, he had a back injury from work and had to have back surgery. There were nights that I ate and my dad would sit and wait until I was done eating before he would eat to make sure that I had food. My daddy was an alcoholic, but still very much loved me and showed me the only way he knew how. He would send me to church with my friend Emmeline and her family every Sunday. Also, any other time that I could be there. It was free babysitting. Emmeline's mom, Cheryl, used to take care of me from time to time and even allowed me to go to dance with Emmeline. This was my first real exposure to somebody who was considered a Christian, who showed me the love of Christ and accepted me regardless of what was going on with me. During 4th grade, my dad on and off had a male nanny at home. And we didn't know, but he was a pedophile, and he would also molest me. And I was so scared I wouldn't tell my dad. And my dad still to this day does not know it. But I know the Lord was watching over me because he did not stay in our home very long. My dad kicked him out in about 3 weeks. He said it was because he was messy, but I know it was God protecting me as I'm looking back these days. In the 5th grade, my dad got into contact with my stepbrother, Billy. He was getting married and wanted my dad at his wedding. So my dad went to Florida for what was supposed to be a vacation. I stayed with Emmeline and her family. As well as part of the time with Holly, my dad was gone about 2 weeks, and it coincided with Emmeline's family schedule, so Holly took care of me. And she was a really caring woman that really did her best to provide a safe, loving, mothering relationship. She was a single mother, and she completely understood my dad's situation. They did not date, and honestly, was just a friend. I remember that year, and I went to church, and I remember them saying that when you are scared, God is always with you. Deuteronomy 31:6 has been one of my favorite verses. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For me, them was the people who had kept harming me. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. I wasn't a believer, but that verse still stuck with me. And I also felt that if God would always keep me safe, why did he allow so much heartache in my life? I was confused. I went to church religiously, but it was a way to keep away from my home, not because of relationship. After my father came back from Florida, he told me we were moving at the end of the school year. I was devastated. You were going to take me to Florida? That's like 3,000 miles away. To be with someone that you hadn't seen in over 20 years? How could you take me away from everything, I thought. I began to even be angry and filled with emotion. And I remembered having to tell my friend that I was never going to see her again. Again, I questioned if God loved me. Why was he allowing this to happen? I had already lost my mom, Nigel, my family, and now I was losing my friends and life right before I went to middle school. Anger and abandonment welled up in me, but again, I couldn't express it. Feelings weren't allowed in my home. The summer came and Billy flew to Oregon and helped my dad drive to Florida with all of our belongings. Along the way, he dropped me at my grandma's house. That year, she had moved to Nevada, and I thought that I would be safe from the summer sexual abuse. Boy, was I wrong. My grandma flew my brothers out to Nevada to stay with us for the summer. I felt completely alone. During that time, I was scared and angry. After my brothers left, it was just my grandma, Pop, and I. And I was treated with so much love, I almost didn't want to go to Florida. I was scared. My daddy was there, though, and I was a daddy's girl. The summer came to a close, and I was told I would be leaving. I asked how long would it take to drive 3,000 miles. My grandma told me, "I'm sorry, you're not driving. You are going to get on an airplane and fly by yourself." I had flown by myself before, but it was only like an hour flight. This one was many hours, and I was scared, but again told to get over it. When I got to Florida, my dad had changed. He was drinking more, and I immediately was labeled the geeky kid with a funny accent. But I never had one, so I never understood it. I think it's a Southern thing. And I was also labeled the one who had the alcoholic loser father. Again, I was alone and didn't know what to do. I quickly found a church in my neighborhood that I could walk to. I knew that if I got into church, I would be away from the dark, empty house at night. That's where I met a man named Eddie. This man was a youth leader from church. He was different than most of the church people. He was down to earth and fun to be around, and he was kind of like a big kid himself. I found myself at church a lot, just to be around the caring youth leaders. I would go to any time the doors were open, and I was on every sports league that was open to the girls. I seen something in Eddie that I never really realized before. I asked Eddie, "What is it about you that makes you so annoyingly happy?" He told me that it was the joy of knowing God was with him. I was 11, and I wanted that joy. My life had been miserable at this point. After talking with Eddie, I asked the Lord into my life. But I didn't feel that magical, spectacular, overwhelming feeling, so I didn't think it worked. I continued to go to church to get out of my home, and at age 12, I started to find acceptance from boys. When I was about 14, I met a girl and went to school with her. She had a boyfriend, and her boyfriend had a friend. And so we were going to be the group, and there was 4 of us. He was 18 at the time, and I was only 14. I was not sexually active, but that summer, I started smoking pot, drinking, and decided that it was time to give up my innocence. Plus, he was the first male that ever told me he loved me. My dad never did. Those words never came from his mouth. I gave him my innocence, and my life changed. I had decided that the only way to get attention from a man is to have sex, party, and be fun. That summer, I had my first job. I worked at Chick-fil-A, and my dad told me, "You're old enough to work, find a way to get there." I would walk, ride the bus, or even sometimes get rides home with random guys from the mall. I started to skip school and go hang out with this guy and his friends and party harder. At the age of 15, I moved in with this man and his parents. And at that time, his parents knew of my age, and we started partying even harder. I had this friend, Tara, and she took me in as her residence babysitter teenager. She was much older and had 4 kids. She decided it would be better for me to live with her than to live with that man. But her life took a drastic change. She decided that I would be her permanent babysitter for partying time and needed me to watch her kids. So she would take us all along with her because I wasn't technically responsible enough to be left at her home, in her opinion, so it was better to bring me to the parties and put us in a room. When the kids would fall asleep, I would go out and she would give me alcohol. I would watch them do ecstasy and cocaine. I would drink and smoke pot with her like I was one of her friends. This went on for quite a while. I can't remember the exact years, but it was between 15 and 17 years old. I met my ex-husband Jason shortly thereafter, and him and I would party together. He was my dealer. So we moved in together in a mother-in-law suite in a bad neighborhood. We would party and carry on. This is when he introduced me to cocaine. I was tired of the smoking, not killing my emotions, and I was tired of drinking. So I decided that people seemed happy when they do cocaine. So I decided to give it a try. Tara did, so why wouldn't I? At this time in my life, my dad and I had gone our separate ways. Tara and I didn't talk, so I was again abandoned. What else did I have to live for? ended up being addicted. And one time while we were partying, we did it for several days at a time, where that was all we did. During this time was when I found out just how abusive he truly was. I told him I didn't have any more money, and he punched me in the face, broke my nose, and strangled me. At that point, I thought my life was going to come to an end, but if it wasn't for the friends that we were partying with, I don't know if I would be here today. But then I look back on it and realize that it was God's provision, even when I wasn't following him. 2 days after that, I found out I was pregnant. Jason told me that we must abort the baby. We can't afford one, and I had already messed the baby up with the traces of drugs in my system. I would go to jail if I stayed with them, or if they found out that I had them. I could not justify having an abortion, so I went on a binge. The next day I went to work, and I had a miscarriage. I knew I'd given it to myself. Mission successful. The baby would be better off that way, and no one would have to know that I murdered that baby. Or so, that's how I justified it. Today I still continually hurt. I continued to party for about 6 months or so, but at this time, it was longer and harder. I realized I had missed a period and thought I was pregnant again. I went to the health department and got a free blood test, and it came up that I was pregnant. As soon as I found out, I decided that I was never touching anything again. That was on November 18th of 2003. I realized I was a mommy, and I could not go through the hurt that I did with the last baby I lost. Her name was Precious. I left Jason for a time period and ran into my dad after not seeing him. I told him I was 4 months pregnant, couldn't really hide it, and that I was no longer with Jason and had nowhere to go. He told me to come home. So I did, and I lived with him until I had Courtney on July 24th of 2004. I ended up pregnant with Ethan on my 8-week checkup, and the doctor yelled at me that I was not even clear. I already was a few weeks pregnant. I hid the pregnancy from everyone until I could not hide it anymore. I had Ethan July 6th of 2007. At that time, Jason and I were trying to work things out. However, I was still living with my dad. We flopped back and forth for a while. Then in 2006, we moved to Kissimmee to start our life over, because if I pulled him away from the drugs and the friends that he had, everything would be good. Yeah, not really. I found out I was pregnant with Kyle in November of 2006 and told Jason that if he didn't marry me, Kyle would not have his last name and I would leave him for good. We got married in January. Kyle was born in June. At this time, Tara had cleaned up her life and was involved in mine. Jason was gone a lot and left me in Kissimmee without a car and with 4 kids at home. He would go out and not come home, and when he would be home, he was abusive physically, mentally, and emotionally. I told him I needed a car to take the kids to doctors and stuff, and also to take his daughter from a different relationship to school. He finally decided to get me another car. Immediately, I looked for a church. There was a calling deep within me that told me to find people I could be around. In October of 2007, Jason came home at 11:36 p.m. and got his clothes and his 6-year-old that was from another relationship. He told me he was leaving. I tried to plead with him and tell him not to leave me and the kids. I wasn't working, I had no money, and rent was due. He continued to abuse me and push me and hit my head up against the wall, and my daughter at this time was 2.5 years old. She came out of her room to see Jason beating me and started screaming. I will never forget her face. It's engraved in my memory. He picked up Courtney and told her that she will never see him again because Mommy is mean and Mommy hates Daddy and is making him leave. Emotional trauma started for my daughter at that point, but also continued to break through me and send up more walls. I immediately told her, go to your brother's room and check on them for me. Be a big girl. And as she went in there, I made sure that she was safe. I followed her and locked the door, and we waited until he was gone. We made a bed in there and stayed in there. The kids were too young to remember what has happened, thankfully, and they had no clue. It was about a week before they even asked for Jason at all. They were used to him not being there. So the rent was due that week, and we were already a month and a half behind. So I called Jason and asked him for it. He told me he wasn't giving me anything. This was the beginning of many moves to come. and more abandonment.